This is a very rare and very proud occasion. We are bringing into being today a very new and needed instrument to serve all the people of America. This legislation establishes the 11th department of our federal government, the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
He knew what he wanted to do. He lived it. You know, remember, he was elected to Congress in 1938. In 1938, there was no running water and there was no electricity in the hill country where he grew up for the first 20 years of his life.
We can argue or talk about voting rights, and we can talk about school rights and employment rights. But one of the things that touches Americans most deeply was housing. Where do people live? A great deal of emphasis was placed on the unrest in cities because there were riots in Detroit, there were riots in Washington, D.C., cities were burning. So it was a difficult period through which this country moved.
I came to HUD and really loved the place. The first piece of legislation that the President signed was the Housing and Community Development Act. And he really believed, and I thought he was right, that the block grant program was exactly what the country needed, that we would waste no assets. We couldn't waste a nickel.
Sometimes I think the H in HUD doesn't get enough billing relative to the U. The housing that HUD's responsible for is in every community across the country.
HUD is more than just housing. It's education and transportation. It's economic development and a clean environment. It's about giving folks the tools they need to build a brighter future.
In less than a lifetime, in less than my own 57 years, America has become a highly urbanized nation, and we must face the many meanings of this new America. Between now and the end of this century, our urban population will double. City land will double. In the next 35 years, we must literally build a second America. Fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life.
I think the Fair Housing Act has taught a couple of generations of Americans, at least leaders, that this is part of the American dream.
I mean, it seems so elementary to have fair housing, but HUD is out there day in and day out trying to enforce our fair housing laws and trying to make sure that people get treated fairly when they go rent or buy.
Well, I came into HUD at a pretty explosive period of time, right? The housing market was blowing up, the world was in the middle of a financial crisis, and HUD's place in history was very important at that time.
Without FHA, the devastation that we saw in our communities and our housing market would have been dramatically worse. I have no doubt about that.
The men and women that live on our street, it's not them and us, but it's we. It's not therefore but the grace of God go I, but rather there go I. It's really important to reflect on 50 years of the incredible work of HUD. And the reason I'm saying that is previously, before there was a HUD, it was unimaginable in our country that men, women, and children would be homeless. It was just unthinkable.
Thanks to President Johnson, the Congress of that era, some of the experts and leaders across the country, they took to assemble all of the disparate pieces that might exist out there, such as FHA leading the way, but then all of the other things we were doing related to urban renewal and community development and rental housing and mortgages, and pulled it all together in a department that I think has proven it is an important part of the American story.
HUD is the Department of Opportunity. Everything that we do Everything that we do, whether it's working with our local communities to revitalize them or helping to ensure that responsible borrowers can get their first home, or helping after a disaster has struck, we ensure that Americans can reach their American dream.